welcome back to Real Seekers. I'm your host, Dale, the Real Seeker. And for today, I'm going back to the SNS archives. I'm posting up an old episode, but this one's a special one. This one was our first season finale episode, where both David and I kind of reflected on our first season of SNS and came up with overall themes or issues that came up repeatedly and that we wanted to address. I, for example, wanted to address some issues, common trends that I got from the skeptical feedback. Obviously, I was the only Christian involved on the boards and that sort of thing. So it was, all the skeptics versus me, and I had to deal with certain issues and misunderstandings on the skeptics' part that kept coming up. And so I wanted to address those common themes. And David did his synopsis as well. So yeah, that's what this episode is going to be. It was a long episode. It was 4 hours, over 4 hours long. So I'm going to break this up into two parts, about 2.5 hours for the first part and 2 hours for the next part, or so, an hour and a half to 2 hours. Enjoy the show.
And hello, welcome back to Season 1 finale of Skeptics and Seekers. I am and have been your host, David Johnson the Skeptic, joined by the other guy.
Yep, I'm Dale the Christian or Seeker.
And today, in the third chair, you the audience. You, the audience. No special guest today. It is Dale and myself as God intended. And today we're going to make our final impassioned plea for the hearts and, dare I say, souls of you, the listener. You, the ultimate skeptic. You, the ultimate seeker. We are just the vessels. Presenting our side of an age-old argument, but the real skeptics and seekers are the people who listen to the show, who consider the arguments, and who move their lives in one direction or another because of the truths that they find. And it has been a privilege to be a part of helping you find that truth. Before I get into my argument, I'm going to turn the microphone over to my partner in crime to make a few announcements and say whatever's on his mind.
Sure. So yeah, just as we're bringing season 1 to an end, just wanted to let you guys know, keep your feeds open. Stay subscribed to Skeptics and Seekers. David and I may throw in a couple bonus episodes throughout the summer as solo episodes. So one thing, for example, that I have coming up is I was invited to come on as a guest on the Right to Reason podcast, which is an atheist broadcast by Robert Stanley, where they discuss religion and politics and that sort of thing. So here's what he heard me on the dogma debates, and he thought I was absolutely fantastic on the show. So take that, Tara. But sorry. But yeah, he said he would love to have me come on his show and discuss the same topic. He was really impressed with my thought experiments and how I approached the Abraham test. So yeah, that's set to be recorded on June 1st, and if I can, I'll try to upload it onto Skeptics and Seekers, or at the very least put a link to the show for you guys to check that out.
And I also want to just give a special thanks to all of our very special guests who have occupied the third chair this year. And I won't try to call them all out by name lest I forget any, and they are not forgettable. They all gave excellent expositions of their ideas and positions, accepted the pushback with grace, and thank you all for making this season very enjoyable and informative. So with that.
Yeah, I agree in terms of the guests. Yeah, thank you to everyone who who came on, for both doing me a favor or the ones that David reached out to. Yeah, you guys made the show an amazing success and brought a lot for us to consider.
And just so you know, we still have some that we just didn't get to this year, and so second season we've got more guests lined up, and I think it will be good. Although in the second season, I don't know that we will do as many guests. Quite frankly, our guest list got away from us this season a little bit. Dale and I had a lot planned to talk about that we just didn't get around to talking about because we did have guests that kept coming up, and it was delightful to be sure. But I think that we will probably actually trim that guest list a little bit next season to make sure that we can cover all of the subjects that we want to. So once again, thanks to all of the guests. They were all my favorite guests. And so with that, I am going to start us off. This plea of mine does not really reference any arguments that Dale has made throughout the season. One of the things I thought about doing is just going back through all of Dale's arguments and forming a rebuttal against them. But I don't actually think that would have been the best approach. We'll do a little bit of rebuttal in this show to be sure. But I wanted to speak directly to you, the audience, and not just to those of you who have made your decision, but those who actually fit the definition of skeptic. Those who are either Gnostic or on the fence, even those on the Christian side who are dealing with doubts. Those of you who are unsure, those of you who are looking for answers. I want to take a moment to talk to you. And so the theme for my talk for the next few minutes is to thine own self. Because I find that one of the prevailing constant drum beats in Christianity is that self is the problem. If you have a problem, it's self. It's your sinful self, your selfish self, your wrong-headed self. It's self. And the Bible is always enjoining us to deprecate ourselves in some way. And I think that once you have deprecated yourself, you've opened yourself up to all manner of harm. And I want to see if I can't talk to you and avert some of the harm that you're opening yourself up to when you deny yourself, as the Bible repeatedly tells you to do. I do not want you to deny yourself. I want you to embrace yourself. I do not want you to loathe yourself and doubt yourself, but to love yourself and be a proud and confident individual. To thine own self. 5 points. Be true to your life. Christianity demands that you commit suicide, a sort of spiritual suicide, that you lay down your life for your belief, that you take up your cross, which is an instrument of death, to follow Jesus, that you empty yourself of yourself to make room for something else. Suicide is bad. Spiritual suicide, equally bad. Do not listen to someone who tells you that you need to die to yourself in order to live for something else. When someone tells you you should kill yourself for Christ, you really should tell them to get off their lawn, get off your lawn. This is a hard no. The suicide cult of Christianity that tells you to die to yourself is most unhealthy. Be true to your humanity. Christians are fond of speaking of humanity in deprecating ways, and that has leaked into our society. We say things like, well, we're only human, as if to say that we are less than something that we should be. But I embrace only human in that we are only ever human. That is what we are. We're not human plus something else. And I, for one, am not a human striving to be something ontologically higher than a human. There is nothing ontologically higher than a human. To be human is to achieve the pinnacle of this life on earth. And I am glad to be it, and you should too. There's nothing else to attain outside of humanity. So embrace it and appreciate it. Contrary to Christian propaganda, this world is most definitely your home. It is the only home you will ever know. This is your home, this world. And by this world, I would expand that to this universe, because who knows, maybe someone will come up with a starship and we'll live on another planet, but it's still a part of what people consider this world. This is our home. And any other notion is just childish fantasy. You should, contrary to what the Bible says, love the world and make the most of everything in it, and avoid all who bring you any version of the following. 1 John 2:15, do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. Screw that! This is your home. It's a great home, and you should embrace it. There's nothing wrong with your humanity. One of the tools of religion is to make you doubt that your humanity is a good thing so that you can strive for something other than. There is nothing other than. Be true to your morality. This is a ticklish issue, I know. But let me tell you, the moral argument, I know it well, is misnamed, as it does nothing to tell anyone what is or isn't moral. It just kicks the can down the road. The Bible itself does nothing to clarify what is moral. It only confuses the issue. We don't need God to tell us that slavery is wrong. No one ever need read that in a book. We know it's wrong, and if someone thinks slavery is okay in any context, then we know that they are either wrong or evil or psychopathic. Now, the God of the Bible had a moment where he thought slavery was okay. We know that he was either wrong or evil or psychopathic. Either way, he is utterly disqualified from telling us what is right or wrong. Whatever moral intuition you reach out for, it should never, under any circumstances, be that guy's. Be true to what you know is right. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to get it wrong, but you're going to get it right way more often than the writers of the Bible. Be true to your senses. You know what? That fire in your belly is dyspepsia. It's not confirmation of a biblical truth. Calling it a properly basic belief or the internal witness of the Holy Spirit does not make it anything different or more reliable. Now, we know that our senses can deceive us, and we should find ways to test what they are telling us when they tell us extraordinary things. When your senses tell you that you are flying, check the label on your medication before stepping off of a tall building. You might just be feeling floating because of the chemicals. Find a way to check the intuitions of your senses, even if you think you are getting messages from a still small voice to do something that is socially unacceptable. You should find an external way of checking that. Even if you think an angel has appeared to you to tell you something tremendous, find a way to check that. Even if you think that you are getting an internal witness of the Holy Spirit, you could ask him something like, can you give me the formula to the drug that cures cancer? And write it down. Check it. Find a way to check it, especially when your senses are telling you things that are extraordinary. The ancients were superstitious to the extreme. We know that. Why on earth do we trust their testimony that's tied to their senses when their senses are telling us them things that our senses don't tell us today? They routinely conflated internal visions with seeing actual things. Now, we don't trust the ancients when they claim to have encountered other gods and other magics. There is no reason that we should trust the ancients' senses when they talk about the adventures of Yahweh. We need to be true to our senses, not the senses of the ancients. Be true to your search. And here I'll pause. So be true to your search. Let me just say a few words about the search. This season, in one sense, has been all about the search, all about your journey, whichever side you happen to be on. But there are some things that could disqualify your journey, that could disqualify your search. There are some things that might, in fact, make you not a true seeker. I don't have a formalized doctrine of true seeker versus not true seeker, but I do have a few thoughts. First of all, make your search falsifiable rather than philosophical. If you're looking for answers, make sure that it's something where answers can be found. Don't just make your answers based on who has the smartest sounding, untestable argument. So your search is possibly not a true search if it cannot produce falsifiable answers. Make sure that you search for things with real answers that can be verified. Not every question you can ask is a question for a true search, in my opinion. An example of this is what happens to us after we die. Well, I understand that a lot of people have existential angst about dying. But that question assumes that something happens to you after you die. So it's more question begging rather than an actual question that leads to a true search. But let's say that question drives you to a search and you just have to know and you can't live life comfortably without knowing. Well, ask yourself, who is an expert on that that you could ask? And then if you found an expert on that, how do you validate their answer? It's not a question that you can actually validate. And so that kind of disqualifies it as a true search if it leads to answers that can't utterly be validated. And then finally, when you find your answer, I know this is going to be a little controversial to both sides. When you find your answer, stop searching. Stop searching. If you are on the seeker side of things, and you find after a good search, a true search, that there is in fact a God, you should stop searching. You should accept the consequence that there is a God and then move on to the next part of your journey. And you should only revisit whether or not there's a God if you have reason to doubt the results of your first search. If someone brings up something new, something that you haven't considered, something that puts things in doubt. Otherwise, accept your search and move on and live your life. And the same is true for the non-believer. If you are a skeptic and you have done your search and you have found, to the best of your ability, you have found that there is no God, stop searching and live your life. And you should not resume that search until there is something that makes you doubt the results of your first search. What my interlocutor would have you do is keep searching forever. But here's the problem. And this is the problem with all of these things that I've listed as a search. If you do not make your search falsifiable, then what you were really doing is confusing a search for a faith position. Because at the end of the day, that's all there is. If your search is for things that cannot be validated in any way, you have to settle for a faith position. And if you don't stop searching after you find the answer, then what you're saying is there's a faith position that's stronger than the answer that you found. It's not a search. It's a faith position. Don't confuse a real search for a faith position. Do your search, live with it until there's a reason to suggest that your search might be wrong and need to be redone again. Be true to your search. Be true to your senses. Be true to your morality. Be true to your humanity. Be true to your life, to thine own self. Be true. I turn it over to Dale to make his case.
Okay, so my case, believe it or not, I didn't actually write out my case in response to David's blog, although there are some areas of overlap. I sort of did my own thing. So, yeah, when I was sort of reflecting on my time on season 1, I was trying to think of what were some of the things that were my strengths versus weaknesses. And obviously, with the comments, that's exposed to an area of weakness that, for better or worse, is a part of me. So, yeah, that's something I need to work on. However, my main theme is one of my strengths that I believe is one of my strengths. And I know that's controversial. I've received feedback saying that actually I'm not good at this. But I think my strength is actually coming up with frameworks that help us evaluate and bridge the gap between skeptics and seekers, or skeptics and Christians, and so that we can sort of understand or frame the issues that are controversial between us. And what I thought about doing was, okay, let's, in terms of engaging, I wanted to look at 5 of the main objections that I haven't yet fully addressed, and I won't get to here fully, but and show how we can sort of contextualize these issues, and what I make of them. So the first main skeptical objection that I've received pushback on is, so people are familiar with my intellectual approach to studying the various religions in a systematic and consistent way. I've developed my process for doing that in my Bayesian analysis and that sort of thing. But I've received some pushback from some skeptics saying, hey, Dale, don't you know there are different strokes for different folks? And not everyone approaches religious questions intellectually. So I just wanted to respond to this. So in the first place, what is the purpose of religion? And I think it's human beings in a general way want to get as far away from the state of imperfection that we're obviously in. Obviously David takes issue with that, but I won't respond to his point here. But there's this sense that people have in general that something's not right. We aspire to something better, and religions provide answers as to how we can go about achieving that. So this is why we study religions. But what about the claim, okay, well, there are different avenues through which one can approach studying a religion or finding out which religion is true and that sort of thing. So I actually wanted to recognize and admit, look, I fully admit people are different. People have different proclivities. They have different personality types. And there are different ways that people come to faith. Not everyone goes through such a rigorous amount of research as I had done and that sort of thing. So I actually, and no human being is one thing or another. So I actually used the framework of Hindu gurus who have come up with a system of 4 different spiritual paths or yogas, which are designed for the different personality types as they saw it. And I've Christianized these. So I think we can take some of these and use them within a Christian framework. But yeah, so the first is the reflective or intellectual yoga. This is jhana yoga. This is the path that I favor, I take, and I advocate for, and that sort of thing. Then there's bhakti yoga. So this is the path of through emotions, primarily love as the fundamental emotion. So love and light, you'll hear that from Tara, that love is the reason she does everything. So this is bhakti yoga, the way to God through emotions. And yeah, that basically reflects in a Christian context, coming to God through cultivating our emotional and spirit, which is how we relate to God and that sort of thing. The whole we love others because God first loved us. Then there's karma yoga. So I've received this from people like Richard Morgan, who, they've said, you approach God through being busy and doing actions, get into a homeless shelter and volunteer time to help them, go to a soup kitchen, do things, get to God through work. And then the final yoga is Raja Yoga. So this is getting to God through various psychophysical exercises or various spiritual experimentation techniques. And this includes meditation or yoga or even drug-induced visions or dream experiences, these sort of things. So these are the 4 yogas that Hindus have come up to describe the various paths that different people can approach the divine or approach God. And I think we could learn something from that. I do think there's some truth. At the very least, I think with the first 3 yogas, I can see Christians coming to God through emotions, through experiencing the love of God and that sort of thing. And when combined with a properly basic belief, that God is true, the Christian God is true, yeah, that's a valid path. Or people volunteering at a soup kitchen or that sort of thing and realizing God is real that way. So I do recognize, I'm a little bit sketchy on the Raja Yoga on the last one, because I think that's an agent of chaos. The other ones are more orderly, whereas Raja Yoga sort of strips us of our rational faculties, depending on what you have in mind. I'm thinking of like drug-induced visions and that sort of thing, or dream quests initiated by drugs. But yeah, my main point here is, look, none of us are one thing or the other. What is it? What is the passionate point I want to imply? Number one, we are all human beings. Are all of the paths are relevant to every single human being, and I want to stress that no human being is engaged in a true quest as a real seeker if they are not engaged in jhana yoga, in the intellectual approach to studying religions. This is, in my opinion, the most important, and or at the very least, it's a necessary component of a spiritual quest. The Hindus themselves recognize, hey, this is the shortest path to salvation, engaging in intellectual arguments. It gets you there faster than anything else. The Greeks, obviously, notice this in stressing logos, the principle of reason over and against sensational forms of knowledge and that sort of thing. And Bacchus. I'm very much, as Friedrich Nietzsche would say, an Apollonian. Reason is the best way to get us there, or at the very least, it's a necessary component for discovering religious truth. So if you're not engaged in that component, you're not living a full life as a human being. You're not going to get to the answer, because that is a necessary component of one's search. So that's my first response to the skeptical objection. This is going to take a long time. Sorry, David. Yeah, I'm just wondering. Do you
go
want
for
me
it.
to go through everything?
No. Okay, go for it.
Okay. So the next objection is one that I've gotten from several people, including David himself. So this I call authoritative apologetics versus epistemic humility. So yeah, this is something I've heard multiple times, as I've said, where I come across as this religious fanatic or a fundamentalist or an arrogant apologist who, lacks epistemic humility or doesn't empathize with the plea of skeptics on various issues and that sort of thing. I stick to my guns. I remain firm when I feel I'm warranted to what I believe. And this is seen as a problem. And usually it's coupled with something that really annoys me because it seems like it's just a dismissal of everything, of my opinions and that sort of thing. But they'll point to, yeah, but look over here, this Christian over here disagrees with you. You're a Molinist? Ha, there's a Calvinist over here. You don't think hell's too bad? Because it's not a torture chamber model? Well, have you met David Johnson? He thinks it is, and he was a Christian preacher, so I guess you're wrong. It's this appeal to disagreement, disagreeing Christians, and this arrogant certainty that I seem to have versus what they want, be in a state of Christian confusion. So yeah, that's sort of the objection. Now, how would I go about engaging with this? So this actually interacts with a new area in epistemology called the epistemology of peer disagreement. And it basically asks, look, what is a rational person supposed to do when they're faced with an epistemic peer? So that's someone that's supposedly equally competent, familiar with the same evidence, has a equal cognitive and educational basis for knowledge and that sort of thing and abilities. But yet they hold to a counter viewpoint to mine. What does the person do? And there are two fundamental positions. So I think this is where the friction's being caused between skeptics and that object me in this way versus me. So the first is there's a conformist view. So this is the view of you skeptics. This is the view of people saying, well, if that comes about, what you do is you must either abandon your beliefs, say, well, I don't know. I don't know if you're right or I'm right because we're peers and we contradict. Or you come to a compromise position, between each other, you work out some compromise position that you both agree to. So that's the conformist or conciliatory approach that I believe the skeptics seem to take here and that I think's wrong. But then, thankfully, there's also the steadfast view. So I'm a steadfastist. No, I think we should continue to hold on to our beliefs, even in the presence of peer disagreement, unless we have due or sufficient reason to change our mind or become agnostic after considering the reasons for the contrary opinion. We don't just abandon our beliefs mindlessly because, he disagrees. Okay, I guess I don't have my opinion. No, you say, well, why do you disagree? What are your reasons? And I evaluate that for myself. So, yeah, I highly recommend the steadfast view because there are various reasons why two seemingly peers might disagree. So, yeah, in the first place, the conformist view is just self-refuting because there are peers that disagree about it. Secondly, it's not always clear whether two people are in fact epistemic peers. Even if the two are scholars, they both have PhDs in a relevant field from an accredited university. I mean, maybe one of them paid attention in class while the other slept. Maybe one keeps better up to date with the academic peer-reviewed literature than the other. So we can't just assume, these guys are academic peers. That has to be investigated. Are they actually on a similar knowledge base and that sort of thing and in a similar position to judge? Also, we have to consider, this is another thing I've done, what if one of the peers has overriding knowledge outside of the area of disagreement that indirectly has an impact on that question? So, I've appealed to this, for example, with the virgin birth. Me and David are academic peers. I have no proof that it did happen. He can't prove necessarily that it didn't happen. So let's say it's we're peers and it should be agnosticism. We both disagree. I could actually come in and say, no, it's actually more probable that the virgin birth did happen because I have outside knowledge that Christianity itself is true. And therefore, and the Bible is sufficiently attached to Christianity. Therefore, the virgin birth is in the Bible. Therefore, it happened. Or vice versa. Maybe David has outside knowledge that Christianity is false. Therefore, okay, it probably didn't happen, or supernatural miracles are not possible, or something like that. And then finally, thirdly, we have the issue of bias. Obvious. Skeptics have brought this up against Christians, like Lydia McGrew and that sort of thing. So, yeah, bias is an obvious fact of reality. It will sometimes interfere with academic or epistemic peers, their integrity and honesty and fairness in their analysis of a given issue. I don't think that will be controversial. It happens on both sides. So that might prevent them from being epistemic peers. And then finally, and most importantly on this issue, is the fact that, look, I have first-person knowledge of what I did in my search. None of you guys have that. You can gain access to bits and pieces of it from what I directly reveal to you. But other than that, you don't have first-person knowledge like I do of what I did. So I have no idea what some random Christian who believes homosexuality is cool, why they came to that decision or what they did, were they actually fair and that sort of thing. But I do know my treatment. So I don't care if somebody disagrees with me. It's totally irrelevant and meaningless. What I do when I confronted with that is say, okay, well, why do you disagree? Present to me your reasons, and then I'll decide. If you have good reasons, then I'll modify my opinion. But just presenting me, this Christian disagrees. Look, 80% of Christians think homosexuality is cool. I don't give a darn. That's totally irrelevant, and it should be. My passion plea is to take a steadfast view. Steadfast doesn't mean that you're not open to changing your mind, but it means that you remain steadfast unless and until you have sufficient reason to change your mind. So that's my plea with that objection. Sorry, is this taking too long, David? Or
No, make your case.
Okay. Now, the next objection I call to infinity and beyond. So this is an issue of David, but also other skeptics have sort of the issue of headcanon, as he calls it. You're making up various scenarios to defend God and that sort of thing. And it goes beyond the explicit statements of the Bible. It's going above and beyond the Bible. I'm using my brain to think up certain things. So they'll say, look, this is a wrong thing to do. And if you're doing it, you should just be within the strict confines of what the Bible says. I think this is wrong. In the first place, I do think it's obvious that Christianity is an evolving religion. It's a living religion. There are developments that have taken place. The Christianity that I practice is not exactly the same as the first century. We have to recognize this. But the question is that a problem? And I think, no, it's not. At least in certain cases, it's not. And it relates to, there are two different approaches to Scripture. So there's the regulative principle of worship or Scripture, which is sort of, they worshipped in house churches in the Bible. We have to worship in house churches. They didn't use there's no descriptions in the New Testament of the apostles playing musical instruments or dancing. Therefore, that's sinful. You're not allowed to do that in the church. And then there's the normative approach, which is what I take and what I advocate for. And this says, no, that's stupid. Oops, that's wrong. No worries. That's stupid. That's a stifling principle to take. The normative one, it takes principles from the Bible, principles of worship. So if you're not preaching the word of God in a sermon or presenting the gospel message, that's an essential element. That means you're not doing church if you don't have that. Likewise, I think singing and praising God is an essential element. Prayer is an essential element of a service. But, other than that, certain things can take different forms. My pastor uses PowerPoint presentations. I don't think anyone in the early church was using PowerPoint. So yeah, I think the issue of headcanon, we have to realize my passionate plea here is, look, God wants us to worship him with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our strength, and with all of our mind. Again, we are a complete picture. We have to use everything to worship God and to approach God. We don't want to have the intellectually and emotionally stifling doctrine of the regulative principle. Or Muslims, they have the doctrine of bid'ah. No religious innovation, no religious speculation. If you even ask philosophical questions like, can God create a rock that's too big? That's heresy. That'll get you killed in some places of the world. That is ridiculous. God wants us to use our minds. He wants us to wrestle and reason from the scriptures and from the general revelation to come to increasingly more and more knowledge of who and what he is. So yeah, that I don't think, my main point here is there's nothing wrong with headcanon. Where I see an issue with headcanon is when we come up with our own ideas. So I have my Molinistic defeater or my real seeker criteria and that sort of thing. If I become, I also have my method for arriving at what are the essential doctrines. Me and David have gone back and forth on that. And David has challenged me at a higher level. Well, what if your method itself for arriving at the essential doctrines is wrong? I don't think it is, but I have to admit it's possible that my hermeneutical method could be wrong, and I have to not be too dogmatic on that without sufficient warrant. I have to be open to the possibility that I could be wrong on that issue, because I am going above and beyond what the Bible says, and I'm using human reason to arrive at my conclusion there. So, my main point here is headcanon is cool, but just recognize it for what it is. It's headcanon, so don't get too dogmatic without due warrant. Okay, so skeptical objection number 4. So this is from my good friend Darren. Christians just make things up. And I've given a subtitle here, the problem, as I see it, of skeptical presuppositionalists, and the assumptive nothing buttery of scientism and naturalism and that sort of thing. So yeah, this is an issue I've encountered quite a lot from skeptics, and it's been very problematic. So I'm constantly accused of just making things up when I appeal to philosophy or philosophical notions or modal logic, properly basic beliefs and that sort of thing. And in some of my conversations with Val, there's what I consider an arbitrary distinction between what are called plausible scientific explanations versus fanciful supernatural explanations, and the latter of which are just discounted without due reason, in my opinion. Skeptics will disagree and say, no, we have warrant to discount those. But yeah, so that's the objection, is there's just anything that's outside of the realm of science or empirical evidence is just made up and is not true. So how did I want to go about framing or contextualizing where these differences are coming from so we can sort of bridge the gap? So the first is how we approach the philosophy of science as a discipline. So skeptics will take what's called an internal philosophy of science. So they view, look, philosophy is just another branch of science proper. It helps us mostly linguistically with, clarifying our terminology and that sort of thing. But ultimately, there's no difference between philosophical questions and scientific ones. Sooner or later, they will all reduce to psychology, to science. So, for example, epistemology. That's not philosophy, that's science. That's really psychology or neurophysiology and that sort of thing. And critically here, Where I think skeptics are actually the ones just making things up, is they just assume without rational justification. Science is its own rational justification. It doesn't need verification or confirmation from some higher viewpoint, aka philosophy, or logical principles and that sort of thing. It just justifies itself. So that's the internal philosophy of science. Whereas most rational people, most philosophers, put it that way, people that actually think about these things, philosophers of science, take what's called, including my own professor, by the way, who's an atheist, they take an external philosophy of science view. So this is science. Look, science and the scientific method are proper objects for evaluation via philosophy, a higher order discipline, and applying logical principles to the scientific method in order to make it work, and in order to evaluate what is the difference between good and bad science and that sort of thing. So philosophy is a second order or normative discipline, whereas science is only a mere first order or descriptive discipline of reality. It doesn't, you can't get an ought from an is kind of thing there. But yeah, so it's philosophy for us that justify the presuppositions of science and evaluate the epistemic validity of various scientific claims and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think one of the main issues with the IPS is it just begs the question. Skeptics are literally just making things up when they just say, no, just science works, it justifies itself, kind of thing. So a second major area for why we're having a difference of opinion is, so there are presuppositions of naturalism and that sort of thing, metaphysical naturalism, or at the very least methodological naturalism. And I think this is a big problem as well. And this sort of grounds the framework for scientism, that only the scientific method or empirical evidence will work. But we all know that there are these presuppositions behind them, right? The knowability of the external world is not covered by science. You can't prove scientifically that my senses are reliable guides of what's real, or you can't address the realism, anti-realism debate scientifically and that sort of thing. So yeah, the main difference here, there's ontologists versus naturalists. And this is where the making stuff up thing comes into play. So ontologists will accept, look, there are abstract entities as well as physical things. So things like numbers or logically possible worlds, consciousness and that sort of thing, these things are actually real entities that we experience every day and interact with every day. We all, I've said it's obvious these things exist. They're abstract, but they're real. We deal with them all the time. And scientists would say, no. There's only the physical objects. Everything reduces down to physics and that sort of thing, the hard sciences. And everything else is just pseudoscience, fantasy. So that's an area of dispute. The final part of this that I wanted us to help bridge the gap is, what is the nature of the scientific method itself? And here I think skeptics, often lay skeptics, will have this sort of naive view. There is such a thing as the scientific method. There's one thing that all scientists do, and that's the scientific method. It's what we learn in high school and that sort of thing. But actually, that's not true. Reality is much more complicated. There are multiple scientific methods depending on what type of science, and they're radically different. There is no standard set of procedures and that sort of thing. Some people, like Val was alluding to inductivism and how that represents scientific reasoning for plausible explanations versus fantasy and stuff like that. But again, as I said, science is much more complicated. It's actually a hypothetical deductive method. And what I would say is we should adopt the eclectic model for developing scientific methodologies. So, this recognizes that there are a cluster of different approaches. It involves various forms of reasoning, deductive, nomenological. So that's like the falsification principle, for example, deductive statistical, inductive statistical. There are different types of explanations as well. So there's forensic science. Things are not repeatable. There's compositional, structural, or intentional explanations. And basically, it's the eclectic model looks at 7 different aspects on the science. So, and how those are different and that sort of thing. So I'll just read out what the 7 areas are, but I won't go into detail about them. So the first one is the formation of scientific ideas. Second deals with the nature of scientific questions and problems. Third is the use of scientific ideas and scientific explanations, how they're used practically. 4 is the nature of scientific experiments. 5 is the testing of scientific ideas. So this is scientific confirmation, which David alluded to as a problem for theists. We create a problem for philosophy, as he said. We create unfalsifiable ideas, according to him. The nature of scientific ideas, or laws versus theories versus models. And then finally 7, the aims and goals of scientific ideas. So this is the eclectic model. It looks at these 7 aspects of science and the scientific method, and presents, look, there are differing approaches by scientists, practicing scientists, for each one of these. And I just wanted to focus on the first one because it proves the point. The formation of scientific ideas. It relates to the objection of just making things up. I come up with my Molinistic defeater, for example. That's just making stuff up. Well, I guess you think scientists are just making things up too, because that's what they do. When they're forming their scientific ideas, there are principally 2 ways. It's from below. So this is a process of reasoning called abduction, and it's basically just educational guesswork on their part. They're inventing a theory to fit the observed facts that we already know. Obviously, they go beyond that with confirming the theory and that, but I'm just addressing the formation part. Oh, okay. Well, I guess that sounds what I'm doing with my Molinistic defeater. I'm looking at the facts. I'm coming up with a theory from below, abductively reasoning what could make sense to fit those facts. And there's the second way, reasoning from above. And this is, again, where they have this overriding worldview or knowledge that impacts upon them in coming up with their theories or hypotheses. Again, just like me and my Molinistic defeater, for example, or real seeker criteria. I have overriding knowledge that Christianity is true, God is morally perfect, and I reason from above. Okay, well, we have this fact that people are getting killed by order of God. How can we explain this? Okay, well, there's a Molinistic defeater. It explains the facts abductively. And from above, I have overriding knowledge that a morally perfect God exists. So this theory would make sense. So technically speaking, at the very least on the first aspect of scientific methodology, the eclectic model, I'm just being a good scientist. I'm formulating theories in exactly the same way scientists do. I mean, scientists come to their ideas in very weird ways. If you know anything about the history of science, I mean, one guy, I forget who it was now, but he had various dreams, weird dreams about snakes biting their tails, and that's what came up with one of our most famous scientific theories of all time. So. I just want to end this point with a quote from Walter Wink. And he's referring to modern skeptics who hold to this position of scientism and that sort of thing. And he says, look, people with an attenuated sense of what is possible or plausible will bring with them that conviction to their examination of reality, and they'll thereby diminish it by the utter poverty and limitations of their own experiences and worldview. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of the friction that I get when I'm presenting my ideas. There's just this assumed position of skeptics to assume scientism is true, or empiricism or that sort of thing, and everything else is just making stuff up, you can dismiss it. So yeah, finally, my fifth point. So a Christian's argument from ignorance. So yeah, I've when presenting the positive evidences for Christianity from miracles or what I call G-belief authenticating events, I've often heard, oh, you're just appealing to an argument of ignorance. You can't explain how the shroud images were formed naturalistically or explain the resurrection appearance to the 12. Therefore, God did it. So, yeah, I'm alleged to be using this argument from ignorance or a God of the gaps type reasoning. Geez, I'm losing my voice. So, yeah, this is entirely false. I'm actually reasoning perfectly logically. I've come up with an 11-premise deductive argument based on co-opting the argument from confusion or undue confusion that skeptics use all the time. So yeah, I'll leave that in the sources because I know Anthony was upset that he lost that or something. So I'll put that as an attachment in the sources, my 11-premise argument. Plus, premise number 8 is where I lay out criteria by which we can adjudicate the fulfillment of all of which allows us to rationally, as a quote-unquote reasonable person, average person in the pew and that sort of thing, can reasonably say, yeah, this looks like this event involved God in some way. That's in premise number 8 in the text, in my document there. And look, it says, if we can prove an event actually happened, 2, that the event is quote-unquote extraordinary. Notice I'm not saying necessarily supernatural, but it's extraordinary. And I think in my Shroud series part 4, I actually outline what that means in detail. So you can go through the criteria in the attached document or listen to my Shroud series part 4, where I actually discuss how I would show that the Shroud evidence is extraordinary according to criterion B. And then finally, most importantly, the event takes place in a context charged with religious significance. So that's where we've done shows on that. So that's where the event in question has to be sufficiently attached to the religion. David and I did a show on sufficient attachment. Also, the event serves to attest to the truth of the religion. So it's a very specific purpose or teleos, end goal for the event itself. And finally, the event itself is not subsumable to any other religion. So, and again, me and David did an early show on subsumability as well. With all of these criteria fulfilled, we can at the very least inductively conclude as a rational, reasonable person, quote unquote reasonable person, the legal definition, God's involved here. We can detect the design or agency of God involved in this event rationally. And this is my sort of plea is I want you guys to sort of think when you're thinking of positive evidences, think in terms of these criteria for how you would identify the agency of God versus just a random natural event or a natural anomaly and that sort of thing. So I think I've gone beyond what I've seen in any other Christian apologist in coming up with these criteria, especially with criterion C, and with my uniqueness falsification criteria and that sort of thing. So, take a look at that and maybe think about that as to how we would bridge the gap. Like when do my criteria allow us to say, yeah, God did it, versus oh no, it's a natural anomaly. No matter what the evidence is, I will always just reject it and say, well, somehow it's a natural event that doesn't involve God in any way. So that's finally it. I'm losing my voice, as I said, but that I went over these 5 objections because I wanted to give you guys my take, my answers, giving everyone a defense to the questions posed, the challenges posed to me, but also to highlight what I think has been a strength of mine in this series, how I approach systematically the objections of skeptics and try to contextualize it into a way where the skeptic can go, okay, that I understand, that's where you're coming from, and vice versa. The Christians can say, okay, you've got this position, and then, okay, what are the arguments for and against? Why should we privilege one position over another? I truly believe I've done a very good job in helping us to bridge that gap of where our differences are and contextualize some of these issues over this season. So yeah, all in all, bad and good. I've learned good things about myself, and I've learned I have certain weaknesses, and especially with the comments and that sort of thing. But all in all, I think it's been a privilege to be on. I'm grateful that I learned these lessons. I fully intend to work on bolstering or boosting up my strengths and eliminating as best I can the weaknesses that I've discovered about my character. So yeah, that's my case. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Okay.
Wow. That took a lot longer than I thought.
Yes. So I'm hearing an echo of my own voice. It's now going away, so I hope that you didn't hear that as a listener. I don't plan to edit anything, so hope it's listenable.
Do you want to go maybe address your case?
So we could stop.
Okay.
I mean, look, I'm not going to, but I just want to present it as an option to the listener. We could stop. You could stop now. Actually, listener, you have heard both our cases, and I don't think that one really overlaps with the other, and so.
See, I told you I didn't copy your thing.
So you can take from it what you will. I am happy to present my case as is. You can go back and listen to it. Nothing that Dale has said changes it in any way, and I just declare I win. So that's
you could just as easily say I win.
And Dale could too. So, right. So, but the fact of the matter is, there's no reason other than it's just my personality type to rebut anything that Dale said. I don't feel obliged to do it because I think in the grand scheme of things, the way Dale presents his case is simply not how people think. It's not how humans work and operate. And obviously some humans do. Dale does.
But maybe it should. Maybe that'll help bridge this gap and make it feel like we're engaging. Like I've heard that like I said, I think this is my strength, but I recognize that on a perceptual level, skeptics don't think this is a strength. I've been told directly that this is a weakness of mine. So maybe if we think along these lines, I mean, yeah, I presented arguments why I think my position's better briefly, but pretend I fail on that. At the very least, we have a way of thinking, like, okay, the philosophy of science, are you internal or external? Or the different paths to God, are you more a pathway through emotions? Or, it's a way of helping us to understand each other, I think.
Okay, so the woman at the grocery store looking for the right kind of butter to put in her grocery basket, listening to this podcast, is not going to be moved by anything that you said, I don't think. And furthermore, the things that you were appealing to, your former podcasts and arguments, I just don't think that that's how that person thinks, and that's the person I'm trying to reach. And I think that I have said things that give them reason to think and give them pause, and you have not. So this is, if you are writing an academic paper, I think that you've got a lot of interesting thoughts, and I think that you should put it in an academic paper. I think that you should scout it around to academic journals and see if it has play there. Because there might be some kind of person there in those circles that will respond the way you think. But the audience member that I envision, they just don't think that way, and I don't.
Well, see, I
mean,
don't...
when I was a preacher in a church, Dale, preaching on your side, when I was on your team, I didn't have people who thought that way.
Right.
And I have taught classes and preached sermons at a lot of high end churches where people were smarter than me, and they just didn't think that way. And I guess one of the advantages I have is having dealt with real people in matters of faith where they live, and I know how they think. And so I hear what you're saying. Well, maybe they should think differently.
Yeah, that's my main,
right.
my
But
main thrust.
yeah. So you're saying maybe you should be a different kind of human, and that's not an appeal that works or matters.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, with the first, this sort of goes to Sarah's first objection, right? And well, I recognize people are different and have different proclivities, but we are all we are all intellectual, rational beings. In addition to whatever else we will, maybe I'm more emotional than I am intellectual, but that doesn't negate the fact that you are also an intellectual being, and you need to be a full human being. You need to engage in rationality if you're asking.
But there's a difference between intellectual and academic. Would you agree with that? Do you see any nuance there?
Sure, yeah. Like if you're saying like I'm talking above, but I don't know. I've tried to talk to the lay person. So me and you have slight disagreements in our approach. We've discussed this a lot of times where you want to dumb it down to not as an insult, but I like dumb it down to the language in the bar, the language in the streets. Whereas I want to sort of elevate people to sort of challenge and expand, and maybe that, like, look, people, the barroom talk type approach has been around for, most people are like that, as you say. That's been around for millennia. How effective has it been? Maybe it would be better if people actually did the work to challenge themselves. I mean, I'm not going to.
The people at the barroom level are challenging themselves. The Homer Simpsons of the world are challenging themselves. They simply have a limit.
Yeah.
And so you have to frame that challenge within their limits.
Yeah. But do you think this is beyond, like, I don't know, like understanding what? Let me see.
This is sophomore college stuff, Dale, and I think that it is beyond most people. There's a reason why only 30% of Americans have a bachelor's degree, and why the other 70 do not.
Well, okay. Well, let me take. So, for example, with objection number 2, I think the person in the bar can understand, and they're being elevated to, oh, okay, there's actually a technical term. This is the epistemology of pure disagreement, and there are 2 primary fundamental positions. The ones that skeptics take is the conciliatory approach, right? If you're confronted with someone who disagrees with you, you just, okay, I don't know what to believe. I just abandon my beliefs, and that's it. And that's the sense that I get from you guys, is you guys have been wanting me to be humble by, look, Dale, you're a Molinist, but there's a Calvinist. You think homosexuality is a sin, but look, 80% of modern day Christians think it's not a sin. So you want us to abandon. That's the conciliatory approach. You have a little label that helps you understand where those people are coming from. And then there's the steadfast approach, which is my approach, which says, no, hang on to your beliefs unless you have due reason. You don't just abandon it. You ask that contradictory peer. You say, why do you think that homosexuality is okay? Or why do you think Calvinism is true? And then you evaluate it on your own. Like a person in a bar couldn't, like, they're elevated in terms of learning helpful terminology that gives labels, but it's still understandable for a person in a bar, I think.
So I've got this in my notes, and I would like to come back to it, if you don't mind. So my first note was actually about the intellectual, what we were talking about before. And I just want to make sure that that's rounded off before we move on to something else. which is, I think there is a matter of intellectual privilege that you are simply overlooking. So if I were to concede that you really do have the best approach, which I don't concede, I think that to concede that would mean that only a fraction of the population has a chance of gaining the level of spirituality that you think they should. Because what you are not recognizing is the amount of intellectual privilege that is required to get to the level that you're talking about. Heck, I have debated with you for a year on these very themes, and you used some words and phrases and alluded to concepts that are above my head in your speech. Oh, okay. So, and I'm a pretty clever guy.
Yeah. I was trying not to. I was hoping this would bring clarity. Okay. Well, let me engage this way then. So, I hear what you're saying. I want to interact with it, and I think you're right. People have intellectual abilities, and sometimes that can be a problem. Like I said, I thought what I've said in my blog and that sort of thing would be understandable to people. But let's relativize it. My main point is we all have a duty to use our intellect in adjudicating this to the best of our ability. After that, it's God's responsibility, that real secret criteria. But you have to make that effort to try and challenge yourself. If you're just sitting around in a bar all day and you never think about, I presented these 4 different approaches, or yogas as Hindus would call it. Okay, you can say, well, where do I fit? The pathway to God through emotions. I understand what emotions are. I know what that is. Do I privilege that? And is Dale right? Should I be using a combination of these and not neglecting one approach over another and that sort of thing? Like these are questions that a person could challenge themselves and ask themselves. What approaches am I using in my religious quest, or am I using any of them, and should I be using them? Like, these are questions I think the bar person could ask.
Yeah, you're asking that bar person to spend, the equivalent of 4 years of college developing a systematic philosophy for life. And people just don't do that. That's not how we live. So, yeah, could a person do that? Could a person take the next 4 years and develop a systematic philosophy, worldview that's comprehensive, and encompass all these modes of thought? They could, but I contend that would be a fairly misspent 4 years. It is not how people live. I don't think it's how people should live, and I think that at the end of their 4 years of journey, they would, A, not have a degree that they could use, and B, they would still be confused about their next move in life. So I fundamentally disagree with the level of privileged intellect that you think that people should have and or pursue in order to live a reasonable, consistent life. It's just not true.
Okay, but I've come back with that, right? So I want you to hear me and engage with me, because I've already said I don't think necessarily that is the standard. I think that's preferred. I mean, I think that the more education you can get, the better. But people have lives. They can't afford that kind of time. And I've recognized that. I've said you can't neglect the intellectual to the best of your ability. Maybe you've got 3 kids. You don't have the time to be reading academic books or going back to university. You've got to work and make the money and that sort of thing. But you can't just neglect asking these important questions. One should be asking these points of questions and doing their best to to come to an answer. Maybe it's okay. Once a month, I watch a debate and listen to the arguments, and over time, I watch enough debates that I think this is a sufficient amount of data. I'm going to make this decision on a balance of probabilities. So I'm not trying to advocate, no, you have to go to school. Like I might not be smart enough to. I'm trying to get into a master's. I might not make it. Maybe I'm not a scholar. If that turns out to be the case, that's fine. I've done my best, which, according to you, is slightly above average than others to come to it. But I'm not going to look down on myself. Oh, I didn't become a scholar, therefore I don't have the right to my opinion. No, I did my best to engage intellectually and engage in that avenue towards the truth. So yeah, I fully acknowledge and recognize people are different. They have different abilities and that sort of thing. So that's why I relativize it to each individual's circumstances and them doing the best they can. But at the same time, my passion plea here is I want to avoid this, okay, well, I can just shut off my brain then. I don't, there are different paths. I can just focus on the emotions exclusively, or I can just do karma yoga through work and that sort of thing. I just want people, no, you can't exclude the intellectual path or the other paths. You do so to your detriment. It's a detriment to me that I'm not fully as engaged in the emotions path as I should be. I should be exercising that as much as I do intellectual stuff, to the best of my ability at least. So yeah, that's my main point there. Yeah, I want to lead into your first point case. So in the first place, to thine own self be true. Sure, that sounds great. That would make a great Hallmark card, and I think to some extent I agree with it. However, there's a problem because our selves are not perfect. We're imperfect. So maybe following what to thine own self be true is not always the case, is not always necessarily the good thing to do. I mean, Hitler was being true to himself. When he slaughtered all those Jews, he truly believed that was the good thing to do. So yeah, I don't think true to your life, I forgot.
Yeah, that was the idea of Christians wanting you to die to yourself. And I don't think that anyone should ever consider themselves dead to themselves.
Gotcha.
For any reason.
Gotcha. Okay. So to be true to your life, this sort of goes hand in hand with your second point about being true to humanity, because actually Christianity tells being a Christian is being true to our lives, our true lives, and being true to our true humanity. So it's not that humanity is seen as being a bad thing. Actually, God says in Genesis, he looked at us and said, yeah, we're good. But it's since then we've become subhumans in effect, because we've contracted this sin virus through the fall. And yeah, I think we all have this sense that something's imperfect in us, and life could be better in certain ways. So yeah, I would like to come back on this notion of what about, how do you know that the humanity that we're living in, where rapes occur and death is happening and all of that, and no, that's the ideal state of humanity. That's the best we got. Versus no, we can perfect humanity. We can become true humans, the way we were created to be, and live lives that the Creator expects us to.
Okay,
to
well,
live.
I would push back on even the question. So let me just go back a half step when you said that we are in some way subhuman. Wrong, and I will simply not accept that under any circumstances. But you're certainly going to have to pay for that with some proof if you're going to sit there and say that people are subhuman or less than what they are supposed to be in some way. That's just a bald-faced claim that has no basis in fact. And so how do you know that humanity was ever better than what it is right now, so that you call the state of our being sub?
Right. So two ways. In the first place, people seem to have an intuitive knowledge that all's not right in the world. So I could appeal to that. That there are obvious ways. A world where humans don't rape each other is obviously better.
Right. So you appeal to existential angst and fantasy. So what? Don't care. I don't care if you think that someone has an intuitive knowledge. That's not knowledge. They just feel like, because they're uncomfortable with what we are now, surely we must have been better in the past. Surely there's something better for us. Surely, I don't care if that makes you feel better to think that. That's not science. That's not evidence. So so screw that.
Your question was, how do I know that we were better in the past?
Yes.
Is that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So in that case, it would be divine revelation that is warranted through knowing that Christianity is true and the Bible is sufficient.
Okay. So because it said so in a book. Let's just be very clear about that, so the person in the bar and the person walking their dog understands what you just said. It said so in a book, and so we must have been better in the past. Bullshit.
Okay, so David, that's not what I said. See, this is what frustrates me. I'm the one accused of not engaging, but then you misrepresent what I said.
Clarify it then. It's not just that we read it in a book. Tell me which part of that's wrong.
Yes. No. So that's the half-truth part. So I did say we read it in the book, but what else did I say? Is that all you heard? It's in the book? That's it? Is that all I said?
Yeah, that's all that I heard that resonated with me. Tell me what else you are trying to say other than it's in the book. So let's take the book out of the picture. Tell me how else we know.
Well, no. So
can we take the book out of the picture?
The full truth is it's in a book that is warranted as being divine revelation, and therefore true.
Okay, so we can't take the book out of the picture. So it is because it's in a book.
A book that is warranted.
Okay, I don't care what else you say about the book. You're just qualifying the book. It's in the book, and that's why we know. No,
but the reason I'm saying that's a half-truth is it's misleading to the audience. You're saying, it's just some random book like any other old human book.
Okay, I didn't say it was some random book, although I think that I could say that. It's in a book, and therefore we should believe it. Now, you're qualifying the book as being special and true and believable. Great. Don't care about all that. But it still comes down to it's in a book, and therefore we know that humans were better once upon a time. Humans also, since it's in that book, must have lived to be upwards of 1,000 years once upon a time. It's in the book. And that's why we should believe it. That's crazy.
Why is it crazy? If we have reason to believe that it is a divinely revealed book, it's not crazy.
Well, okay. We have not, as far as I know, surfaced the bones of humans that lived hundreds of years, and we have not surfaced the civilizations that show that humans lived a perfect, harmonious life in some way that supersedes the one that we live now. We don't have any reason to believe that other than the fact that it is in your favorite book. In fact, everything that we can find shows that that is not true.
Okay, so I guess it ultimately comes down to, do you have warrant for believing that it is a divinely revealed book versus just another ancient Near Eastern human book? And that's where our differences lie. That's the only way I can know that we were good once upon a time.
So I'm willing to leave that sit exactly where it is and let the audience on both sides just mull that over.
But regardless of whether I'm right or wrong about the past, because that's Christian specific, it doesn't matter totally, because it could be. We need to recognize that we are in a state of imperfection now.
No, we don't.
Everyone.
No, once again, that's a claim. You can say that we are imperfect if you have an example of the perfect. I say that we're not imperfect. I say that we are, in fact, exactly what we should be right now. In a pattern of evolution, in a pattern of maturation of the species, I don't think that we are what we will ultimately be if this species is around for another 1,000 years. But we are also not what we were when we started. And the pattern seems to be that we are getting, in some sense of the word better, not worse. That seems to be the arrow of progress. And so, no, I don't buy what you're saying there at all. And you're not. Yeah, I see an arrow of progress.
So you would agree that people in ancient times were imperfect?
No, you keep using this word, and I don't think it means what you think it means. I am not saying that people are imperfect or that people were ever imperfect. You are the one who keeps importing this notion of a human ideal or an evolutionary ideal of perfection that we have to reach, and I don't believe that for a moment. So that is not, in fact, what I have been saying all of this time. That is what you were trying to import into the conversation.
Okay, so I don't want to get into morality, but why do you judge people? You seem to not think that's actually true when you're not talking about it in specific directly, because you will constantly judge people in the Bible as behaving badly, and you do pronounce this superiority as though, no, we really are better than these people. But then here you're trying.
I think they are. I think we are more evolved than those people. We live longer. We are more socially aware. We are more empathetic. I know that you don't want to talk about morality, but we have a higher sense of empathy. The level of empathy that they seemed to have possessed is not much higher than a pack of lions, if you're to believe the stories in the Bible. So, yeah, I think that is a higher maturation point. I don't believe that is better, because I don't believe that humans are better than a pack of lions, but we are more evolved, I think, more mature in some ways. We have a higher capacity to care about certain things, and I hope that in 1,000 years that capacity will be higher. But that doesn't mean that then we will have reached the place where we are supposed to be. You see, you're the one who's creating this idea of perfection, and I don't think that there is such a thing.
Right. So, and I would say most people throughout history have. The common person in the bar has.
Yeah, well, if I can take a page from your book, I think the common person in the bar is wrong because they've been listening to religionists. I don't see. Okay, so I don't see any evidence.
The common person should be.
I don't see any evidence of this perfection of which you speak. I don't see any evidence of it in the past. I don't see any evidence that we are reaching some stage in the future where you can hit the bell and say, ding, 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 we are now perfect. I don't know what you are describing as perfect. I don't know what that means when you're talking about an evolutionary system. A baby can be perfect without being able to add 2 + 2. But we would say that there's something wrong with that person if they're 12 and they can't add 2 + 2. But this is a matter of maturation. It is not a matter of whether something is perfect or imperfect. And as a species, there are levels of maturation that we have had over time. When we first climbed out of the trees, we weren't as mature as we are today. That has nothing to do with whether we were perfect or more perfect or less perfect. Perfect doesn't factor into it.
So I think it does. I get that you just assert that it's not the case, but perfection would be defined as having as many great. So the standard of perfection, humans want to have as many great-making properties to the maximal degree that they can. So in this sense, yeah, a world where human beings don't have the desire to rape women, or rape a man, that can happen. State or mature. So yeah, under that light, human beings even today lack having all of the great making properties, and or at the very least lack a full degree possible of those great making properties.
Well, but you see,
you're
claiming that. Well, first of all, you're calling that perfection, and I don't. But you're claiming that somehow we once had that and we lost it, and that's where I say you're making stuff up, or you're just taking stuff from a story that you happen to like, but is not validated by anything that we actually see in nature. So, you might say, well, there was a time when we had more of these, what you would call great making properties, but you can't validate that at all.
Well, yeah, I can through the divine, through being warranted in saying we have a divine.
Okay, you can't validate that outside of religious faith, and that's not a validation. Okay, so you've got to already to believe in order to agree with your particular story. That's not the starting point I have. So from my perspective, it is nothing more than a claim that we were somehow at a higher state of maturity than what we are now. And even if I were to accept that it's possible that we were at a higher state of maturity than we are now, which I do not, that still would not constitute that we were at some human ideal of what would be considered perfection by any means.
Okay. So I'm trying to think of how to... Okay, so there's two issues here. So let's, in the first place, forget about the claim about Adam and Eve in the state of perfection or whatever before. Or being better before kind of thing, the fall. Right now, so defined in terms of the great making properties, you could at least agree, look, we do not possess all of the great making properties, or we don't possess them all to the maximal extent possible.
I don't even agree on what a great making property is, let alone all of them and what the maximal degree is.
Do you agree with some of them, though? Like
I don't know that I agree with that term at all, but because it surfaces a type of way of thinking about the world and humanity that is not consistent with a more scientific approach. So I'm trying to translate your language into something that I can use, and I think that there is such a fundamental difference in how you look at the world that it's very hard to make that connection.
You're doing the exact same thing. You're just substituting the word mature. That's a value-oriented word.
Mature is not a value-oriented word. It is not. I am not expressing that a baby has less value than a toddler because of their state of maturity. I'm simply describing their state of development. And I am suggesting that the human species is in a natural state of development. And you seem to be suggesting that it is not in a natural state of development, that it was simply literally dropped from the heavens in a perfect state, and then we lost it. That's a very different idea. than being in a natural state of development. That's why our language is so different and why it's hard for me to agree even with the most basic thing that you're trying to say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I wasn't saying that. That's the second issue that we're going back on. But okay.
So
well,
I just want the listener to understand.
Not,
I'm trying to connect with you where I can, but they need to understand where the presuppositions come in, and where it wrecks the discussion early.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to do. And the same goes for you talking with Christians. You have a duty. This is your argument here, right? So you can't just assume or make stuff up as a skeptic and say that you're right and we didn't.
Well, to the extent that what I'm making up is that the humans are part of an evolutionary process, I'm glad if you want to just say I'm making that up, that's great. I would say you're a science denier and we don't have any grounds to talk about this subject.
No, I'm saying right now, I'm not on Adam and Eve stuff.
Okay, so how do you know which of those properties makes us full humans? What's God's list? Because you haven't given me that.
Moral perfection is one. Having omniscience is incommunicable, but having as much knowledge as possible. We are beings capable of having knowledge. It is a great making property to have as much knowledge as possible. That would make us...
Okay, how do we know how much knowledge is possible? Because now then you would be saying, well, we should have a certain amount of knowledge, but we don't. Well, how do you know that? How do you know that there's knowledge that we don't have that we should have? Because we might, in fact, have all of the knowledge we can have.
Yeah, because you can infer it from the fact that God gave us brains and created us as rational beings. He created a world in which we're constantly trying to discover new things.
Right. But how do you know that we aren't there already? I mean, your whole case is that we're subhuman. We're not there. We're not where we're supposed to be.
Yeah,
there's some kind of ideal state that we're supposed to be at that we're not at. So what is that state?
Right. I've just told you a couple things. And we can know that we're not at that state with knowledge because we can still ask questions to which we don't know the answer.
Yes, but we might, in fact, be at the exact state of knowledge we're supposed to be at until the next moment of evolution. Evolution is a continuing process. You're saying that we're behind the curve somehow. And I'm trying to figure out what the curve is that you think we're behind. A baby is not... somehow imperfect because they don't know as much as a toddler. So an infant might in fact know is exactly as much as they're supposed to know at that particular time in their life. Now, for you to say, no, they're developmentally behind, you have to have some standard by which to say, no, they're developmentally behind. Here's a standard. Here's how we can know that. I'm asking you to give me that standard for this criterion of human knowledge. And once again, you're not giving me any standard. You're just giving me claim upon claim.
No, the standard is to desire to get as much knowledge as possible.
Humans do desire to get as much knowledge as possible. This is why we do science. This is why we do physics. This is why we send people to space with rocket fuel strapped to their butt. This is why we do this.
Just spend the last objecting to my intellectual path, saying that most people, the bar people, don't do that. They don't care.
I'm not talking about individuals here. I'm talking about humanity as a species. And you were claiming that humanity as a species is somehow behind the curve.
Oh. Well, if you're going to generalize it to everybody, I mean, obviously... human beings are affected by the sin disease as individuals, right?
Wait, now you just introduced a whole new thing now, the sin disease.
Oh, well, that was from the Adam and Eve thing, yeah. So, yeah, I can't. Well, generalizing it without a Christian context, I would just say that human beings that make up humanity each have various faults or things that they should improve on, and they all know it, including yourself.
Okay, well, they all know it isn't an argument that I'm willing or able to interact with. I don't know what all knows. I certainly don't know what you seem to think I know. So they all know it doesn't actually mean anything to me.
David, do you think that you could ever come? Can you improve yourself as you forget about? Okay, you might say, "Oh, well, I'm perfect for where I should be at this moment." I don't care. I'm saying, what about in the future? Do you think that you can improve from your current state in any way?
Sure, but I don't think there's a such thing as an ideal state. So when you talk about perfecting envisions an ideal state. Now, what is that ideal state for a human? In order to perfect a human, you would have to have a copy of a human that is that ideal state, and you can't produce one.
Okay, no, but I have in various ways. So that
Well, not in a way that I've recognized. I'm sorry,
Okay.
not trying to be an obscurantist here, but you have not, in fact, produced an ideal human.
Yes, I have.
Okay, where can I look at this ideal human? What page of the Bible can I turn to and find the ideal human?
Jesus.
Really? Because Jesus wasn't human, not completely.
Yes, he was.
Oh, he was fully human, but he was also fully God, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so great. So how do I know which part of him was perfect? Was the human part? Was the God part? Was the human part somehow influenced by the God part? I don't understand that at all. That's not how I am. So I don't recognize your example that Jesus was a fully idealized human.
Yes, he was actually.
Okay, well
we are
then.
supposed to emulate. The Bible says we are to emulate and
Well,
become more
okay.
Christ.
When I have the power of God and can tell a fig tree to die because it didn't feed me, I'll get back to you.
Right. So humans did have superpowers, right? Through God. Jesus had superpowers through God. He wasn't doing that of his own.
Well, okay. When's the last time you had a fig tree magically feed you or wither it to death because it didn't?
I didn't say that's part of the ideal humanity. Though,
Okay.
right?
Well, you did. You pointed to Jesus as if he was a high ideal human, but you want to add his superpowers when you want to and take them away when you want to. I am saying that is not a picture of a human at all.
Right.
I
Okay, so-
I don't see the Jesus of the Bible as human at all.
Right. So here are various different things. I'll list off some things. As I said, I've done through the knowledge thing. I've gone through the morality aspect. We can become more morally mature or more morally perfect, like God.
We'll talk about morality in a minute.
That's fine. How about having a repaired spirit? You've obviously got a damaged spirit. The spirit is the fact.
Well, obviously to who?
To me. And to Christians. You're just talking from your perspective. You're not giving any arguments. You're just saying, "Oh, that's BS."
Well,
That's
I don't think there's any argument I can make against an unfounded claim. That's not really how it works. You call me a mutant alien, and I say, "No, I'm not," and you say, "Prove it." You're not making any arguments. I'm
Okay, well,
sorry.
I can just play the same game with you.
I
You're
don't
just
have
asserting
a
that
I don't have a
perfect
damaged spirit. I don't have a spirit. So you haven't proven that, but just granting that for the sake of argument, you can't prove that my spirit is damaged. You're just saying that it's damaged. And you're saying, "Gotcha." No, that's not an
but
argument.
you're asking me a question to provide what are the areas where humans are imperfect.
And you
so I'm
haven't
giving
done
you-
it yet. Now
But
we will address morality because I understand that you think that that's a case that you can make.
That afterwards,
But we've kind of separated that out. But you really haven't said anything else.
The spirit and knowledge. I've said that.
Okay, I don't even know what the spirit is, and you say knowledge, and you didn't make a claim about. You didn't even make a claim about knowledge. You just say there's more stuff that we could know. So what? Does that mean that we are somehow developmentally behind because there's more stuff that we can know? Is that your case?
Yeah,
Wow. Well, that's crazy.
that's.
Hey, this seems like a good place to introduce bat shit crazy. No one thinks that way. No one is developmentally behind simply because there's more stuff they could know.
To be maximally great, we would omniscience. It's something that we'll never achieve.
So this maximally great idea of yours is unachievable. It
Correct.
seems like a maximally great thing would be achievable.
No.
Well, that's kind of like saying a maximally great God is one that exists. Now, I have actually pushed back on this in private because we have argue the ontological argument, which is something that maybe we'll do in the next season. But the whole idea of a maximally great being is that it's better to exist than not exist, so he must be great. But you're saying that a maximally great feature of humanity is unachievable. I don't buy that.
Yeah, well, that's because it's logically impossible to achieve certain things unless you're God by necessity.
Okay, then it's not a maximally great quality of humanity. Then you can say it's a maximally great quality of God, but we're not gods.
Look, it's a great making attribute to give praise where it's due. If somebody opens a door, I say thank you. To the extent that I don't say thank you, or I don't appreciate it in whatever form, that's a bad thing. That is not us reaching a state of maturity or perfection.
Okay, but humans do that though. So you're still not talking about things that humans don't do. It's something that humans do routinely.
Yeah, but not all humans do it.
Well,
so if you want to talk
not all humans do it every time. But you're saying that we as a species are subhuman. We shouldn't even call ourselves humans because we haven't reached full humanity, or we've lost full humanity. And you're talking about things that either we have already done or routinely do, or things that we can't do because it's beyond our reach. You are not making any sense here.
Yeah,
I mean, not any sense that I can follow.
Okay. There are certain things that we should be doing that we don't, that human beings as individuals, if you want to talk about humanity reaching perfection in general, that means every single individual human is perfection to the degree possible by humans as well. So if even one human being doesn't say thank you or have appreciation when it's due, that's a problem. Humanity as a whole is not in a state of perfection.
Okay, well, what's the perfect IQ?
The perfect IQ?
Yes.
I guess is God's.
Okay. What's the perfect IQ for a human?
No idea. I don't even know what the score. I just don't have knowledge of how the IQ system works.
Okay, well then let's just make up a number for the sake of conversation. This is an analogy, so we will assert beforehand that we're talking out of our butts here. But for the sake of an analogy, let's just say the perfect IQ is 150. Now, I throw that out there because it's achievable. People achieve it. Mm-hmm. And so, since knowledge, in fact, and the ability to process knowledge is a part of your idea of what perfect human is, mm-hmm. then I think that it's fair to say that part of that perfect human would be one with the maximal IQ achievable by humans.
Sure.
So let's just say 150.
Okay.
All right. But we know that most people, not even me, possess that IQ.
Bachelor's is 164, which is higher than Albert Einstein. But
no. I will not let you talk me into revealing my actual IQ.
I wasn't talking about you.
Yeah. So it's high enough, people. But that said, it ain't there, and I don't know. I don't personally know anyone whose IQ is there. Although I suspect there are some people who I know who I suspect their IQ may be there, but I don't know for sure. But just for the sake of argument, in order to be a perfect human, that's where you got to be.
Okay.
Do you believe that humans walked around where all humans existed that had that IQ?
I'm saying that it's possible, because human beings have achieved that the state of perfection or maturity for all humans would be every single human being gets to have an IQ of 150. So in the sense that there's even one human being such as me who doesn't have that IQ, as far as I know. I've never been tested or anything, but
well, I don't have that IQ, so we can know that for sure. So
Great.
does that mean that all humanity is therefore subhuman by that criteria?
Yeah, I would think you're not living up to your full created potential.
Okay,
as
so is it fair to say that in generic terms, practically no one is living up to what it means to be human because their IQ is too low?
Yeah. Yeah. That would be, I would say that. I think we need to.
I would say that is a fundamental weakness in your argument that you simply can never recover from. Furthermore, I don't think that you will see why it's a fundamental weakness in your argument. I will leave that to the audience to suss out. But
no, but they're just going to say, well, are you saying I'm more or less human based on my IQ? No, people are human beings. We treat everybody as a human being.
Well, that just seems like a convenient fiction, though. We treat them like human, but you know that they're really subhuman.
Yeah, but everyone is subhuman in one way or another. Everyone has been affected by that.
This is exactly what I want the audience, especially those on the leaning Christian side, to listen to and pay close attention to. This is a fundamental difference here between Dale and myself. You are not subhuman. You are never to think of yourself as subhuman.
What about this? Pain, disease, and
death. Do not
death.
let Dale damage you by convincing you that you're subhuman. You are not. Go ahead.
No, well, be true to yourself. Don't be a hypocrite and follow blindly whatever David says. David thinks having pain is, that's part of being humans.
It is part of being human.
Raping, no, it's not. Not necessarily.
Having pain is not a part of being human. Let me ask you a question based on your magic book then. Once again, based on your understanding, I know you can't prove this, so you're talking out of your butt, but I'm curious to know where you come from here. If Adam and Eve, before the fall, had stubbed their toe on a rock, would it have hurt?
I'm not going to answer that. So I'm going to say this and keep it general. Human beings that don't experience pain or negative effects, harm to their body, so that's better than human beings that are fallible and die and experience disease and that sort of thing.
That's a non-answer, though, because what you said is that part of perfection is not experiencing pain. And you're telling me that we somehow, once upon a time, lived in this state of perfection. And I'm just asking you a question. Did those perfect humans that you think existed feel pain when they stubbed their toe?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that because I'm asking you the question. You always sidestep to make me look ridiculous.
Well, I don't know how that's a sidestep. Ask the question again, though, because...
Is a world where humans don't experience disease better?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. There's one aspect.
Because we're busy trying to cure diseases, and I've got one or two of them that I'm dying for a cure. So, yeah.
Then it's just arbitrary, isn't it? Like you just like that aspect.
Yes, I do like that. Doesn't mean that I'm somehow less human because I have disease. I'm fully human. Humans are things that get disease. You are suggesting somehow that humans are things that should not get disease. And I don't know where you're getting that from.
Well, okay, so the subhuman thing was...
Dogs get hip dysplasia. And, I love my dog, but, if I've had dogs where, as a species, it is just a natural thing that happens to them, that doesn't make them somehow sub-dog. They're not sub-dog. They're fully dog, even with their hip dysplasia problems.
All right, this will be my last word, and then we can move on to the next point. But
okay.
I made a mistake then. I shouldn't have said subhuman. That's the wrong way to say it. Put it this way. We are human beings, fully human beings, that are not living up to our full potential.
Well, what is our full potential?
In the first place, not to have disease.
Okay, but how do you know that is a part of our potential? I mean, it's something that we would like to achieve, certainly. Well, but I'm not the one engaging in the fantasy. I'm engaging in the reality of where we are. What we know is that humans are creatures that get diseases. Now you're saying, oh no, a real human wouldn't get disease.
David, you're making stuff up. You're assuming and asserting. You're doing what skeptics.
Well, wait a minute. What did I assert?
The humanity we have now is the way it should be. we have disease?
No, no. I'm saying that the humanity we have now is what humanity is. I'm not talking about should. You're the one talking about should because you've got this idea of an ideal in your mind. I do not have that. I do not have a state of perfection that I am trying to say this is the idea. This is what a real human looks like. I am talking about what we are ontologically as creatures. We are things that get disease. You are the one who's saying that doesn't meet the standard of what a real human should be. And I am trying to figure out where you get this standard from that suggests that humans shouldn't be like that.
Yeah,
and you have not given me anything to work with except it says so in this perfectly magic book.
No, I'm appealing to people's generally revealed knowledge that we have.
You mean existential angst that things could be better?
No, knowledge, properly basic.
Existential angst,
properly basic knowledge.
Okay, tell me the difference then, because what you said before is everybody knows we can do better. That's existential angst. That's not properly basic knowledge. That's not anything.
Existential angst is the feeling that comes about from having properly basic knowledge that we're not.
Okay, so you're feeling existential angst, which is what I said.
No,
so
but
great.
That's just an attendant feeling that comes about from knowledge that knows disease is not good. We're not in a place where we should be. We should not suffer from disease.
I think that disease is not good too, but I am not saying that is somehow, therefore, not an attendant characterization of what a human is and what a human does. We have disease. How do I know that? Because we're humans and we have disease. You are the one who is taking it beyond that. You are going beyond the is to an ought. And I don't know how you make that leap.
Right, through properly basic belief and divine revelation.
Okay. So
this is how I submit how most human beings who've ever lived throughout history have experienced this form of knowledge. They know that the world is not as it should be.
They have made things up based on the discomfort of their existential angst. I agree with you. My next rebuttal.
But you don't know that. You don't know. Can you just admit this then? That you don't claim to have knowledge that humans are where they are supposed to be. You don't make a claim. You just.
I didn't make that. I don't know that I made that as a knowledge claim. I'll have to go back and roll the tape and listen to this. And unfortunately, I will have to because I've got to edit it. So
I thought that's what you were. That's what I thought you were doing. So that's what I was.
Well, I think. I don't know that that's what I was doing, but if that was what I was doing, I don't mind sticking with it because I think that I can claim that what we are is what we should be because that is what we are. This is a tautology. We are what we are. In order to take it out of that level of tautology, you have to say, no, we are not what we should be. And that's where the positive claim comes in. I have simply given a tautology, and you're saying, no, there's a claim to be had there. And you have not supported your claim with anything other than magical talk.
Right. So, no, that's not true. I've supported it with warranted true beliefs.
Magical talk.
Not magical talk, it's logic talk.
Okay.
But yeah, so my final word, since this was your claim, I guess I get the final word on this is what do I want to say? So yeah, it's no. Okay, move on.
Okay. So we were talking about intellect before. So I want to go back to something that you said here. Or something that you were talking about or implying. So beyond the question of whether people should pursue their intellectual pinnacle, is the question of whether intellect is even the right pursuit for religious truth. So let's say you get us all to 150 IQ, and you have us all in libraries reading old dusty books and learning Latin. Does that actually get us any closer to the kind of information that religion is? I suggest it does not. I don't believe that there is any amount of intellectual pursuit that reveals one iota of religious truth.
Do you possibly mean in isolation, like, or do you mean like in isolation only? Like, if I have an intellectual belief through study that the proposition Christianity is true versus actually being born again as a Christian? I'm not sure what you're getting.
I'm not entirely sure what your question is getting at. I'm going to say yes until I have reason to think that I've misunderstood your question.
Okay. So in that case, yeah, of course, I would agree. That was my whole point. We're back on objection number one, skeptical objection number one for the audience. Yeah, we're not just one thing or another. We are rational animals. Yep, as Aristotle put it, that's part of our nature as human beings. But we're also emotional beings. We're also beings that like having an emotional relation. That's the damaged spirit, where our faculty of our soul, where we can relate to God and have a relationship with Him. So when I converted to Christianity, I was sort of questioning, okay, I have an intellect. The intellectual arguments have led me to an intellectual belief in the truth of the proposition of Christianity is true. And I was then evaluating my spiritual and emotional faculties and saying, okay, am I really willing to commit to this truth and be a true Christian and that sort of thing, and do my best to repent and place my faith, which is a relational term with God and that sort of thing. So that, yeah, you can't, in a sense, you can't come to true Christian knowledge just through intellectually assenting to the proposition Jesus rose from the dead and Jesus was God and that sort of thing. That's part of it. That's a necessary part of it. But then there's other aspects as well. So I would agree with you if you're saying just spend your time in the library to the exclusion of all the other aspects of humanity.
Okay, but I'm making a stronger claim than that. I'm saying that there is no part of religious truth that can be surfaced intellectually. So it doesn't even factor in. It is a little bit like trying to determine if a particular drug would make you feel good. I don't care how much chemical study you do. You cannot know the answer to that question until you do the drug. Can't know it. No amount of intellectual exercise will get you any closer to answering that question.
Yeah, so that I don't understand. That's just sounds like foolishness. I don't even get. And this is a claim of yours. So on the intellectual proposition of,
have you ever done drugs?
I haven't. No.
Okay, I haven't either. For the audience to know, I'm not an illicit drug user, but I have had a lot of prescription drugs that are in some cases stronger than street drugs, because I have had a pretty close brush with death in my life. Not something that I am going to catalog now. I can tell you what the bottles say. I can tell you what the chemicals were. I can tell you how doctors describe it. I can give you the, all of the breakdown of those drugs and the kinds of side effects people report. But at no point could I tell you about the experience of using that drug until I used it.
Okay.
It's simply not possible. Intellectual pursuit cannot open certain doors.
Correct. Yeah, you're talking about experiential knowledge or knowledge by acquaintance. Yeah, I would agree.
So you were asking people to open up an intellectual door to something that simply isn't behind that door. I would argue that this thing that you are calling religious truth is simply not an intellectual pursuit. And so no matter how much people try to meet your intellectual standard, they are still never going to get to a place where you would be satisfied that they are spiritually mature or even capable or knowledgeable, because the intellect is the wrong pursuit of that. It's like trying to find God via science. You, as a Christian, I would have said you can't find God in the lab. A scientist is the wrong person to try to find God. If they do find God, they're not going to find it using their scientific methods. I think the same thing is true with intellect. And so I think that your argument is largely wrong-headed there when you're trying to push people toward greater and greater intellectual pursuit to find God in religious truth.
Okay, so yeah, and that's absolutely wrong, actually. It's so long as we're not saying that they're mutually exclusive, no, the intellect is absolutely a necessary part of the journey, because religious truth involves not just experiential forms of knowledge, but also propositional knowledge. There are certain propositions that one comes to, and also coming to knowledge of certain propositions can affect certain forms of experiential knowledge. That's why when people read the propositions in the Bible, it speaks to them on an emotional level, not just intellectually. So they interact with each other. You seem to think that they're mutual emotions or experiential forms of knowledge are totally mutually exclusive from intellectual forms, and they're not. They relate to each other. They're integrated. And once you achieve both forms of knowledge, that's when it comes together and you can become a born-again Christian or whatever it is.
So maybe we'll come back to this one. I can see that we're not going to really have a meeting of the minds here, because I think we're talking past each other a little bit. I think that we will be able to tease this out a little later. But if I can move on to the next point, which is kind of tied to this a little bit, in an effort to maybe tease out a broader thought. You had mentioned earlier about this idea of people objecting to your style of sticking to your guns when there were other people, your peers, who had a different view. What did you call that? You had a more elegant way of talking about that.
So yeah, in terms of the epistemology of peer disagreement, you can either take a conformist or conciliatory or conformist viewpoint, which is what you take, and then I take the steadfast view. Okay.
So first of all, I don't know that it's fair to say that I take the conciliatory or conformist view.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't. I think you're miscategorizing me there.
Okay.
I do sometimes. Especially in areas that I don't know a lot about. So I have to go with the consensus, because I don't really have anything to contribute. So yeah, in matters of astrophysics, I'm most likely going to go with the consensus there, because I don't have anything reasonable to contribute to that discussion. But there are other things that I know quite a bit about. And I would not take a conformist view, even when there are peers who disagree with me. So I don't think it's fair to label me as one or the other, and I don't think it's wise to label yourself as one or the other.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah. Okay.
So that said, my objection. I know that you were fielding the objections of a lot of people who were in the forum, but my objection, so that you understand it's a little bit more nuanced, is not just that you were sticking to your guns when other peers disagree. My objection is, as an outsider looking in, without the expertise in this matter, I have no way of knowing which of you is right. Now, in terms of science, and I'm just going to combine this with the scientism discussion, because I think it all goes together. In terms of science, we do have ways of finding out who's right. You know, if people are disagreeing over things where empirical knowledge can be had, we can do the experiments, we can do the maths. You know, we can actually figure out who's right or wrong. There is an answer that we can come to. In matters of religion, there's no way we can figure out who's right or wrong. Now, you seem to think that there is, and this is what I was talking about earlier when I'm saying intellect doesn't solve these religious truths. I have no idea whether you're right or William Lane Craig is right or Matt Dillahunty is right. I have no idea. Do I default to the one with the highest degree? Well, you're saying, well, no, not that. But then again, you're saying intellect is a part of it, so I should default to the smartest one in the room. But no, so I can't do that. So how do I do it? Well, do I run it through a lab and see who got the right numbers? No, it's not subject to laboratory experiments or mathematics or anything empirical at all. So then how do I do it? So when Christians are giving different answers to the same question that are incompatible, we non-believers have a right to throw up our hands and say either you need to be more epistemologically humble, or you need to recognize that we as the listener to this debate have no idea and basis of deciding which one of you is right.
Gotcha. Okay. And I will to engage with that. I think that is a good point, a good half point. So number one, yes. My main point here is that we as individuals have to do the best we can to interact with that. You can't just give up. So however, even interacting with the reasons of contrary scholars, it might be something is beyond you, as David said. That there are things where I don't know. I've looked at the reasons as best I can, and I'm just like, well, I don't know. So I do adopt it. I don't have a belief either way. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I'm open to learning if new reasons come and that sort of thing. So yeah, I do admit that there are times where you don't have to take a position. You don't have to go, oh, shoot, who do I believe? I don't know what the reasons are, but I'll just pick this one and remain steadfast or that sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know is a valid option to take if you studied the reasons to the best of your ability and you just don't know who's right. However, when you do need to evaluate those reasons. You can't just throw up your hands and go, well, scholar Craig Keener thinks Acts is historical. Richard Purvo thinks it's not historical. I don't know what's going on. So that's the wrong thing to do. The thing is, look at what Richard Purvo says, look at what Craig Keener says, and others to the best of your ability, and see if you can make up your mind as to what you think is true.
And that's where I think that your answer goes off the rails and becomes very naive. So I understand. I actually do understand what you're saying there, but I don't think that you understand what you're saying there. Richard Purvo and Craig Keener have spent significant parts of their life, certainly more parts of their life than I have time for, to research these issues. They also might have a significantly higher IQ than I do. So they've spent longer and have more resources to work these things out. I do not have the beginnings of the ability to go behind their work and see which one of them I think is right. It will take me 4 years of college just to understand the issues.
Well, that's not true. You can see popular level stuff. You don't have to study it.
I've read lots of popular level stuff, so I want to just cut you off there. I've read plenty of popular level stuff. I've read some academic level stuff, and I can tell you right now, people who think that they understand these issues by reading the popular level stuff are deluding themselves. They might, after 500 pages of popular level stuff, be able to lay out some of the issues that they have been studying for the last 8 years. But that does not catch you up with the study that they have done for the last 8 years. You are not even conversant to talk about that issue after reading popular level material.
Yeah, but you are allowed to you don't have to become a scholar to have a belief. Or to be warranted in.
But you do kind of have to be a scholar to understand what the scholars are on about, because they understand what they're on about. Okay,
Yeah.
so they have these debates, and they're using language that you think you understand. You do not. Now, you might, but the one listening to this podcast, the average person who has not misspent most of their life doing this stuff, does not even know what they are on about.
But
You
they
just
provide
think you do.
Popular. They provide. I provide sources. I submit that people understand. What the YouTube source. Like when I give my sources, I try very hard. I don't always follow through with this because I don't find it, but I try on whatever issue, for and against. I'll try to find a scholar who's written something. Then I'll try to find a long video, 1 hour to 2 hours. Then I'll try to provide a half-hour video, and then a 5 to 10 minute video or a short video, something like that. That's my ideal when I'm looking for sources, so it appeals to everyone based on their circumstances.
I appreciate that. Look. We're not debating on whether popular level material is out there. We're debating on how effective that is in giving people the opportunity to adjudicate between two scholars. It does not. I believe that it gives them a much less opportunity to do that than you do. You think that those popular level sources somehow makes them able to sit on a panel and decide who's right.
Well, they have to recognize the limitations of what they're able to do, right? Like I recognize I like that you guys are being charitable and saying I'm smart and that sort of thing, but at the very best, I'm at an intermediate level. That's the height of my, like, I'm not gonna ever be on Craig Keener's level or something like that, very probably, unless I get education or something like that. But I'll never.
I actually disagree. I think that you are on Craig Keener's level because you're both discussing fantasies. I don't think that. Who's more right about Harry Potter?
Keener, though, right? You're not on his level, so you can't judge Craig Keener as a fantasy or not.
Well, in this case, Craig Keener is probably a bad example for me to poke at because he's a historian, and so he's not necessarily talking about whether the stuff is true, but whether he's talking about criteria of historicity. So it's a different conversation, and it's probably not fair to conflate those two things. I can talk about Craig Keener's level as a theologian. I can't talk about Craig Keener's level as a historian. Yeah, as a theologian, I assure you, you're both on equal footing.
So put it nice. So put it this way. Part of the evaluation of the evidence is you need to assess whether you have a sufficient basis to make a judgment. And I don't think that we are, you have to be at a scholarly level of understanding. I'll never read the classical literature that Craig Keener has. I just reading Polybius' Histories doesn't appeal to me, or Tacitus.
Me either. I'm sorry.
It just doesn't appeal to me.
The thing is, I like history, and I'm never going to go that deep into it. It's never going to happen. I don't have time.
And that's exactly the true of me. Like I'm interested. I love documentaries. Here's a quote from Dio Cassius as to what he says happened, but I'm not going to read his multiple volumes of Roman history. So I'll never be on Craig Keener's, but that's not necessary for me to have a sufficient judgment on, well, is an event that he reports true or not based on the evidence. Same with Jesus mythicism. David will never be on Richard Carrier's level or that sort of thing, but he thinks he has the right to remain steadfast. He knows through first person knowledge if he treated the material fairly on both sides. So remember, I gave those criteria that we can look at and we can, to the best of our ability, evaluate. We can see, are these people actually epistemic peers? Are they relying on any outside knowledge? Do they have any evident bias? I've heard skeptics claim Christian apologists are biased right out of the gate. I remember after Lydia, Darren came on and, she should never talk about what real history is. She's just a Christian apologist. Jim makes this artificial distinction between a Christian apologist versus the real historians, the skeptics and that sort of thing. So,
I do actually agree with him that it's dangerous to mix Christian apology with secular history. You yourself, even as an expert, don't know which one you're doing at any given moment.
So my general point here is, yeah, you can evaluate that bias. You can be aware, look, this guy is a Christian apologist. There is a biased motivation here. So that doesn't mean they're wrong or I'm wrong necessarily, but you can be aware, look, there's that bias there.
And to be clear, I'm not saying that you're wrong. So, not in this point. I don't want to confuse the audience. Dale is wrong about everything. All right, let's just be clear.
David is a brilliant man, so I guess I'm wrong. But okay,
he is wrong about almost everything. So,
and I am. I don't care at this point.
But that's not the argument that I'm making. So the last objection when we talked, I'm not even saying that you're wrong about humans not reaching the level where we're supposed to be. Now, I think you are wrong. I'm saying that that's a claim. But in the grand scheme of things, for this objection that I'm making, I have no way of evaluating your claim. So let's say that you're right by accident. It doesn't matter because I have no way of validating it. I don't know whether you're right or not.
Why do you? Okay, so why do you made a claim about evolution? Very strong claim in our last rebuttal.
Yes.
You're not a scientist. You're not on the same level as Dr. William Dembski or Michael Behe versus Richard Dawkins or Massimo Pigliucci or something like that. Why don't you just remain agnostic? Why do you actually remain steadfast? No, evolution as
I don't remain steadfast. I go with a consensus.
Well,
you're misreading my take on evolution.
So you don't evaluate the reasons that these scholars present. You just go, well, the majority. Well, then why don't you just do that with the Jesus historicity? You're a Jesus mythicist. The majority of biblical scholars
I know more about that than I know about science. Now, I know a little bit about science, but I don't like saying that in public. I wouldn't tell you my reading list because you might think that I'm claiming a higher level of knowledge than I have. So I would rather people think I'm a scientific neophyte than to accidentally claim more than I am in that field. But I would say that as a layperson who just kind of is a fan of the material, I know a pretty good deal about the subject matter, but I don't base it on my opinions and scientific observations. That said, I think I do have some scientific observations. And if we were having a podcast or discussion over, our personal barroom level scientific observations, I think I could make a pretty strong case for evolution. Okay. But that's not why I believe in evolution.
If we're doing season 2 there, I do have contacts with Michael Behe and Dembski, so I can bring them on. You guys can do this.
But I'm not gonna debate a scientist. Because I'm not a scientist.
We could do a probing interview.
I mean, why would I do that? That's crazy.
Because we want to learn. Because this is my point. This is why I'm doing this. Get in there. Don't just. Okay,
I do get in there. You have no idea. I'm trying to tell you. My study on science is way higher than the average person on this. I feel like I've probably maxed out my knowledge on a lot of this stuff.
Good for you. That's what I'm implying.
But what I am telling you is that is not why I believe in evolution. Even though that is also the conclusion I come to, I still don't claim to know enough to land on that conclusion with just my knowledge and experience. So I still lean on the consensus.
Okay, so I would just say, you need to evaluate the consensus thing because that's a poor argument. It's a bad argument to take.
Oh, scientific consensus is a bad argument. I'm not gonna chase it. We'll just leave that there. Fine. All right, but that's
you need to evaluate the reasons. I mean, there's been scientific consensuses that have been proven wrong time and time again.
Right, and if I had agreed with them, I would have been wrong. But that would have been the best I could have done at the time.
Well, I would remain agnostic in that position. If because what you're saying is, look, I've done the research. I respect the heck out of that. That's my main point. Is you skeptics and Christians, you get out there and do your best. Maybe at the end of that, you'll come to David's conclusion, which is just, look, I don't know enough. I from my research, I've learned that I do not have a sufficient base to make a decision. I'm just going to remain agnostic. Okay, that can happen. But you need to get out there and do it. You can't just go, scientific consensus believes in the ether. In the 1800s, I guess there's an ether. That's the wrong thing to do. You demand, no, I want reasons. And I'm echoing Lawrence Krauss. He says the same thing. He's like, don't just believe me or the scientific consensus. Look at my reasons for what I'm saying.
Yeah, I've read Lawrence Krauss. So I suspect much of the audience has too. And I suspect much of our audience, which is very technical and contrary to what you think, very educated, I suspect they've done, a lot of the same reading and research as I have, but they're not scientists either, most of them. Some of them are, and they definitely have a right to a scholarly opinion on some of this stuff, but most people simply don't. This is rarefied air. We can talk about Einstein's theory of evolution all day and never explain it. One of the great quotes about E equals MC squared, I can't remember who made it way back in the day. They were musing that, this theory of relativity, there are three people who know it well. There's Einstein and me and someone else that I assume is out there. and that's, this is of course comical, but this is just to illustrate how difficult this stuff really is. And you might understand the basic gloss of it, but when you get deep enough into it, you recognize that there is only a tiny percentage of the population who can talk about this stuff in a truly conversant way. And at the end of the day, no matter what you've gleaned from your reading a few popular level books, it does not equal you having a right to an opinion on what the truth of the matter is or not. And this is why we have tools like scientific consensus, because the people who have devoted their lives to these things, we can kind of see where they are, and we can look at the discussions that they have, at least the parts of the discussions that we can understand. And we can say, you know what, 90% of the scientists who have devoted their lives in this field believe this about this. And these are people in different areas of science. They keep coming up with the same conclusion again and again and again. This is where evolution is. We have valid grounds to accept the theory of evolution. You don't, in fact, have to be a scientist, and you don't have to remain agnostic. The consensus is overwhelming. You would have to have a good reason to say that you're agnostic about it, and that would be to take a faith position that it may not be true. But I don't think that there is, in fact, a good reason to remain agnostic about that. Whereas there is a good reason to remain agnostic over string theory. And that's a theory that I happen to like. I wish I could say I believe it. I want to believe it, but it's a minority view, and it's got a long ways before it gets to the point of consensus.
Okay, so generalizing it, you're not disagreeing with me. You're evaluating what I said. Okay, yeah, you evaluate whether you have a sufficient base or not. Now, we can quibble over whether merely appealing to a scientific consensus is good enough. I don't think it is, because it's been proven to be false time and time again. There's also the issue of bias, which I've discovered against the intelligent design movement. I think that scientific consensus is a good indicator. It doesn't mean it determines one's beliefs, but it's an indicator that, hey, there must be something here to look at. That's the way I use a consensus. But we can quibble on that. But the point is, you're agreeing with me. Look, you think consensus is a reason to believe something. Oh, okay, whatever. I disagree with, but let's pretend that is. That's fine. So I'm demanding that you ask for reasons. Don't just go, oh, someone disagrees, therefore I don't know. evaluate the reasons for and against as best you can, and evaluate whether you think you have that sufficient base, and remain steadfast in that belief unless and until you have reason to change your mind.
Okay, and just so that the listener doesn't get lost in all of this, this was part of my objection to, part of my pushback to what you were saying, and I was simply pointing out that you were talking about matters of religion that cannot be validated in some other way. Intellectual pursuit doesn't help us validate that. And we can get smarter in maths, we can get smarter in sciences, we can get smarter in history, but it doesn't actually help us validate religious claims. And so when people making different religious claims are trying to vie for our attention in our agreement, there is no mechanism like science to figure out which one is right. There's no way to conclude that. And so that was my ultimate point. I didn't want that to get lost. I said that I would roll scientism up in here, but the next time I come back, I will attack scientism. In the meantime, do you have another rebuttal for me?